In 1962, 6 years before he died, John Steinbeck wrote a letter to Robert Wollston, an actor and author from the 1930s, about the 6 principles he follows when writing a novel. Steinbeck is known for his masterpieces such as Of Mice and Men, The Grapes of Wrath, East of Eden, and many more, all of which delve deep into what it means to be human. In fact, if I could describe John Steinbeck's work in any way, it would be that he writes down what he knows, what he sees, and what he feels, tying them together in a way that best describes both the objective and the subjective truth. That's a pretty wordy sentence, and I'm usually against flowery speech, but Steinbeck was the king of prose, and his is the only writing that I can actually enjoy that really takes advantage of complex vocabularies and what would otherwise be seen as pretentious composition. What he does so well is combine the complicated wordplay of a master author with the simple and realistic style of the everyman. For instance, listen to this passage from East of Eden. "And this I believe, that the free, exploring mind of the individual human is the most valuable thing in the world. And this I would fight for, the freedom of the mind to take any direction it wishes, undirected. And this I must fight against, any idea, religion, or government which limits or destroys the individual. This is what I am, what I am about." This intensely poetic monologue flows so beautifully both on paper and said out loud. I think that's the secret to good writing, and it's something John Steinbeck has perfected. Writing in a way that is pleasing to the eye and sensible to the ear. Just that phrase at the end, "This is what I am and what I am about," speaks so much to the plain speech that all of us use in our lives daily, but that one simple phrase combined with the rest of the dialogue creates such a powerful message that is really driven home by those last few lines. And the best part about it is, it's something anybody could say in the real world if they were inspired enough. It's a careful construction of words that probably took Steinbeck weeks to write perfectly, but is disguised as a stream of passionate, improvisational thought. Once more from East of Eden, and then we'll break down the principles I mentioned earlier. "And now that you don't have to be perfect, you can be good." I love this line because it's something you could have come up with on your own. It's so simple in its syntax, but incredibly deep in meaning. Again, careful construction disguised as casual speech. Now that we've looked into how style can greatly influence the meaning and flow of writing, let's look at what Steinbeck wrote are his 6 principles he uses when writing a novel. First, abandon the idea that you are ever going to finish. Lose track of the 400 pages and write just 1 page for each day. It helps. You are always surprised. The concept of scope is one that I can relate to on a personal level from my experience in both designing games and writing. It's easy to get caught up in the dreams of having a beautiful finished product, but those dreams coerce us to speed up and finish as fast as we can. When all you want is a finished product, that's usually all you get. Slow down, and really take things at the pace you need to in order to deliver quality. A good friend of mine gave me advice that I always adhere to in almost every situation. When you need to accomplish something, break down every step until you've figured out what's the very first thing that I need to do. Once you've figured out that one thing, do it the best you can, and move on to the next. The second principle is write freely and as rapidly as possible, and throw the whole thing on paper. Never correct or rewrite until the whole thing is down. Rewrite in process is usually found to be an excuse for not going on. It also interferes with flow and rhythm, which can only come from a kind of unconscious association with the material. Writing as freely as possible accomplishes 2 important things. It keeps the flow of your writing steady, and it breaks you out of any ideas that you may have that your writing needs fixing. I think this principle mainly applies to first drafts in particular. Writing the first draft of a story is like molding with clay. All you need is those basic shapes, the rough cut of what you want to accomplish, and the messages you want to share. They're not meant for intricate sentence construction or symbolic structure. They're only there for you to put down absolutely anything you want to. First drafts are a sandbox to play in, get messy, to build up and destroy without the fear of breaking something permanent. One tip I've heard, and Steinbeck mentions it here, is to only use a pen and paper. And the pen is important. Pencils can be erased, and it's tempting to erase and rewrite every mistake or second guess you have. At least with pens, you're forced to scribble out words and make a mess of your writing. The mess and the impermanence of the paper reminds you that what you're doing isn't set in stone. You're free to change and rearrange it to your heart's content when you revisit it. Only when we let go are we truly free. Forget your generalized audience. In the first place, the nameless, faceless audience will scare you to death, and in the second place, unlike the theater, it doesn't exist. In the writing, your audience is one single reader. I've found that sometimes it helps to pick out one person, a real person, or an imagined person, and write to that one. It's crucial to keep in mind that unless you're a commercial author with contracts and market obligations, writing to the masses will almost never get your book sold. You've got to write what you know, because writing what you know to be true is the best way to write from the heart. And there's an almost tangible difference between someone who's faking it and someone who isn't. There's just a feeling of warmth and sincerity there that doesn't jive with someone who's writing for a paycheck. Oh, and you're probably not going to be making truckloads of money with writing anyway, so you might as well enjoy yourself during the process and write about what you truly love, rather than playing on a trend or cash grab. Writing becomes much more personal when you remove your imagined audience from the picture and focus on the intimacy of a single reader instead. Number 4 states, if a scene or section gets the better of you and you still think you want it, bypass it and go on. When you have finished the whole, you can come back to it, and then you may find that the reason it gave trouble is because it didn't belong there. The ability to edit is a powerful one. Let's bring up the next principle before we dive too deep into that. Beware of a scene that becomes too dear to you, dearer than the rest. It will usually be found that it is out of drawing. When writing books, making movies, designing games, it's easy to forget that your work of art is not your personal world to play God in. Your book isn't there to come up with crazy characters and scenarios just to see how things play out. This is my own definition here, but art is the opposite of wasted space. Everything you see or hear needs to mean something. That's not to say that every sentence needs to be a deep metaphor on life, but there shouldn't be any empty or useless scenes in the book. Characters, as well as each individual scene, function as one purpose, and that purpose is to drive home your theme. If you have a book where the theme is finding your true self, you could have a character that is looking for their true self, a character who finds their false self, a character who already knows their true self, etc., but you shouldn't have a character whose only defining trait is that they love to eat or something. It may be handy for some good jokes, but it doesn't fit, and it throws your story off the rail of focus. It may sound like I'm telling you how to write, and sure, do whatever you want, but trust me when I say that unfocused editing can ruin an entire narrative. Finally, if you're using dialogue, say it aloud as you write. Only then will it have the sound of speech. I touched on this earlier when discussing specific quotes from Steinbeck, but it's worth reiterating. Dialogue is one of those things that depends heavily on your style, but it should always sound natural. There's a difference between stylized and stilted. This is something that I struggle with a lot. I love writing dialogue that is so natural, but it loses its place in the story. Keep natural conversation on tight reins, always confining it to the matter at hand. Don't let your dialogue control you. Control your dialogue. You'll probably hear a lot of writing advice throughout your career as a writer. Do this, stay on this track, do this thing for a certain number of minutes a day, and you'll be a great writer. The truth is, and I'm sure you don't need me to tell you this, there is no magic formula. It's like I said earlier, you write what you know, and you write it in the way that makes you feel proud. Don't try to be the next Steinbeck or Hemingway or whatever. Be the first you, and be the best you that you can be. Let's let Steinbeck himself close this one out. If there is a magic in story writing, and I'm convinced that there is, no one has ever been able to reduce it to a recipe that can be passed from one person to another. The formula seems to lie solely in the aching urge of the writer to convey something he feels is important to the reader. If the writer has that urge, he may sometimes, but by no means always, find a way to do it. You must perceive the excellence that makes a story good, or the errors that make a bad story. For a bad story is only an ineffective story. My name is Ethan, and this has been Whiteboard Novels.